Here is a city that belongs to China, but where, for decades, you could do things that were impossible anywhere else on Chinese soil. You could criticize the government to its face. You could read a newspaper that mocked its leaders. You could take the government itself to court before judges trained in British law. You used a different money, crossed a real border to get in, and lived under a promise that for 50 years, none of this would change. It was called One Country, Two Systems, a free capitalist city running inside a communist state by mutual agreement. It was one of the boldest political experiments of the modern age. This is Hong Kong, how it was built, how it worked, and how, in just a few short years, it changed. Hong Kong began not as a country, but as a prize of war. In 1842, after the First Opium War, a defeated China was forced to hand Hong Kong Island to the British Empire. 18 years later, Britain took the tip of the mainland across the water, Kowloon, and in 1898, it leased the largest stretch of countryside beyond that, the New Territories. Not forever, but for exactly 99 years. Hold on to that number, because it is the hinge of the whole story. 99 years from 1898 ends in 1997. Under British rule, this cluster of rocky islands and hills became something extraordinary. A deep water port, a free trading gateway to China, and in time, one of the richest financial centers on the planet. But the lease never stopped counting down. And as 1997 drew closer, Britain faced an awkward truth. It could not keep the small piece it owned forever without the vast leased land wrapped around it. The whole city would have to go back. The only question was, on what terms? The man with the answer was China's leader, Deng Xiaoping. His idea was deceptively simple and genuinely radical. One country, two systems. Hong Kong would return to Chinese sovereignty, but it would not be forced to become like the rest of China. It would keep its capitalism, its courts, its freedoms, its entire way of life, for 50 years, unchanged, until the year 2047. This bargain was carved into two documents. First, the Sino-British Joint Declaration, signed in 1984. And second, Hong Kong's own mini-constitution, the basic law which would govern the city after the handover. Hong Kong would become a special administrative region of China, promised a high degree of autonomy over everything except defense and foreign affairs. And so, at midnight on the 1st of July, 1997, the British flag came down, the Chinese flag rose, and the experiment formally began. A liberal, capitalist city folded inside an authoritarian state on a 50-year clock. And for years, it truly was a place apart, governing itself in ways no other Chinese city could imagine. Hong Kong kept its own money, the Hong Kong dollar pegged to the US dollar, printed by its own banks, entirely separate from China's yuan. It kept its own border. A citizen of mainland China could not simply travel in. They needed a permit, as though entering another country. It had its own passport, its own immigration and customs, even its own Olympic team. Above all, it kept the legal system Britain had left behind. The common law with independent judges, where an ordinary person could sue the government and win. It had a raucous free press that ridiculed the powerful. It had street protests. And every year, it was the one place under the Chinese flag where crowds could gather in the open to mourn those killed in the Tiananmen Square crackdown. It was unmistakably Chinese, and yet, in its daily life, unlike anywhere else in China. But there was always a catch buried in the design, and it came down to a single question. who actually holds the power? Hong Kong is led by a chief executive, its top official. Yet the people of Hong Kong have never simply voted for their own leader. Instead, the chief executive is selected by an election committee, a body of roughly 1,000 or more members, heavily weighted toward business tycoons, professional bodies, and groups loyal to Beijing. The Basic Law did hold out a tantalizing promise that the ultimate aim was for the leader to be chosen one day by universal suffrage. One person, one vote. But it never set a date. Below the chief executive sat the Legislative Council, LegCo, the city's parliament. But it too was only ever partly democratic. Some seats elected by the public, the rest handed to business and professional, functional constituencies. Full democracy was always the carrot held just out of reach, promised in principle, withheld in practice. And that unkept promise became the great fault line running through Hong Kong life. Over and over, its people took to the streets to demand the democracy they'd been assured was coming. In 2003, 500,000 marched and forced the government to drop a proposed national security law. In 2014, the umbrella movement occupied whole districts for 79 days, its protesters shielding themselves from tear gas with umbrellas, demanding the genuine free vote for chief executive they had been promised, and were refused. And then, in 2019, came the largest protests the city had ever seen, set off by a bill that would have allowed suspects to be sent across the border for trial in mainland courts. At their height, by some estimates, 1 to 2 million people, approaching a quarter of the whole population, poured into the streets. For a few months, it looked as if the city might actually force Beijing to back down. Instead, it provoked the exact opposite. On the 30th of June, 2020, Beijing did something it had never done before. Going completely around Hong Kong's own legislature, it wrote and imposed a national security law directly onto the city, overnight. The law made it a serious crime to commit subversion, secession, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces, but defined those words so broadly that a protest chant, a post online, or a meeting with a foreign journalist could, in principle, fall under them. It let Beijing open its own security agency on Hong Kong's soil. It allowed certain cases to be tried without a jury, with judges handpicked for national security trials. The effect was swift and profound. Leading activists were arrested or fled overseas. The city's most prominent pro-democracy newspaper, Apple Daily, was raided and shut down, and its founder, Jimmy Lai, was jailed. The streets that had so recently overflowed fell quiet, almost all at once. Then came the rewiring of the political system itself. In 2021, Beijing overhauled Hong Kong's elections around a single principle: only patriots could govern. From then on, anyone wishing to run for office first had to be vetted for loyalty, and candidates deemed insufficiently patriotic were simply screened out. The share of lawmakers that ordinary voters could directly elect was cut sharply. In the election that followed, virtually every seat went to a pro-Beijing figure, and turnout collapsed to record lows. In 2024, Hong Kong's own legislature went further, unanimously passing a second homegrown security law, known as Article 23, that widened the definitions of political crime still further. The main opposition parties disbanded. The annual Tiananmen Vigil disappeared from the city's parks. In the space of just a few years, the loud, argumentative, protest-loving Hong Kong had gone silent. So, what is Hong Kong today? On the surface, a great deal looks the same. It remains one of the world's major financial centers, a dense forest of towers around a spectacular harbor. It still uses the Hong Kong dollar, still runs on the common law, still stamps its own passports and mans its own border as a separate customs territory. In countless everyday ways, two systems genuinely still exists, but the political freedoms that once made it truly distinct have been sharply narrowed. Hundreds of thousands of people have emigrated, many to Britain, which offered millions of Hong Kongers a route to citizenship, and to Canada, Australia, and beyond. Beijing and the Hong Kong government say the city has simply been restored to order. Its unrest over, its streets safe, open once more for business. Critics say a rare and precious open society has been quietly switched off. The striking thing is that both sides are describing the very same city. And over all of it hangs a single date, 2047. That is the year, the 50-year guarantee. Hong Kong's separate system, promised unchanged, is set to formally expire. No one can say with certainty what happens when the clock runs out. Perhaps the two systems quietly fold into one. Perhaps some version of Hong Kong's special status endures. But in truth, the countdown has, in many ways, already been overtaken by events on the ground. Hong Kong was the great test of an extraordinary idea, that liberty and authoritarian power might coexist side by side in one city, under one flag, held together by nothing more than a promise. And for a while, astonishingly, it did. Its story stands as a reminder of just how much a place can flourish when it is left to govern itself, and of how swiftly, once the terms are rewritten, that freedom can slip away. A borrowed place on borrowed time. And the world is still watching the clock.